Dad said. You're a failure, we don't want you. So I packed my bags quietly. Mom laughed. Good luck surviving. 2 weeks later they begged me to come back when I still remember the way the words hung in the air, like smoke after a fire. My father's voice, sharp and full of disgust, pierced through me. You're a failure. We don't want you. And then came the final blow, my mother's laugh, light and cruel. Good luck surviving, she said, sipping her coffee like we were nothing more than gossip at her table. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I didn't even cry. I simply turned and walked upstairs, feeling each step heavier than the last. I packed my things into 2 old duffel bags. No ceremony. No second thoughts. I moved like a machine, not even sure what I was feeling: anger, sadness, shame? Maybe all 3 at once. Downstairs, I could still hear them talking, as if my departure was already old news. My heart ached with a hollow, gnawing pain. For 24 years, I had done everything I could to win their approval. Honor roll student. First job at 16. Paid my own way through community college. Helped around the house when my brother couldn't be bothered. And for what? I took one last look at the bedroom I'd called mine, the peeling posters, the battered dresser, then I zipped up the bags and left without a word. As I stepped outside into the cold night, a strange feeling washed over me. Fear, yes. But also, something else. Something like the first breath after being underwater too long. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have much money. But I knew one thing for certain: I was never coming back. The first night away from home wasn't some triumphant movie moment. It was me, sitting on a cracked vinyl couch in my buddy Nathan's tiny apartment, my duffel bags at my feet, a slice of greasy takeout pizza growing cold in my hand. Nathan had been my best friend since middle school, the kind of friend who didn't ask questions when you showed up at midnight looking hollow-eyed and lost. He just moved a pile of laundry off the couch and said, "Crash here as long as you need, man." I told him I wouldn't stay long. I told him I had it under control. I lied. The next few days blurred together into a gray mess of trying to figure out my next move. I hit the pavement early, resume in hand, wearing my one good pair of shoes that were already starting to come apart at the sole. I applied anywhere that had a "Help Wanted" sign: hardware stores, fast food joints, delivery services. I wasn't picky. I couldn't afford to be. The money I had stashed, a few $100 from my last paycheck, dwindled faster than I thought. Gas money for interviews. Cheap meals. A new belt when the old one literally snapped during an interview. I could feel the walls closing in, every day a little tighter, a little more desperate. The worst part wasn't the hunger or the exhaustion. It was the shame. Every time I opened my phone and saw my mother's last text, "Good luck surviving," it felt like she was right. Maybe I was a failure. Maybe I really wasn't strong enough. One night, a week into sleeping on Nathan's couch, I overheard him and his girlfriend whispering in the kitchen. "How much longer is he gonna be here?" she asked, not even bothering to lower her voice enough. "I don't know. He's trying," Nathan said, but he sounded tired. I couldn't blame them. I was a shadow in their lives, taking up space, breathing their air. I made a decision right then. I would not overstay my welcome. Even if it meant sleeping in my car, I was going to figure something out. The next morning, I got dressed in my last clean shirt, took a bus downtown, and sat on the curb with my backpack until the sun was high. I must have looked like every other lost kid out there, invisible to the suits and skirts rushing past. That's when it happened. That's when everything changed. An older man in a worn blazer and scuffed boots stopped in front of me. "Waiting for something?" he asked, squinting down at me. I shrugged. "Waiting for a break, I guess." He laughed, a dry, tired sound. "Aren't we all?" Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a card, and handed it to me. "Come by this address tomorrow. Early. Tell them Mitch sent you." Before I could say anything, he was already walking away, blending back into the city crowds like he'd never been there at all. I looked down at the card. It wasn't fancy, just a plain white rectangle with the words, "Harrison and Sons, Custom Woodworks." It didn't seem like much. But it was a direction. A sliver of hope. And in that moment, that was enough. I barely slept that night. My mind was a whirlwind of what ifs. What if it was a scam? What if it was some dead-end job moving crates in a basement? What if it was nothing at all, just a stranger's empty promise? But when morning came, I was already out the door before Nathan and his girlfriend even woke up. I took the earliest bus I could find, standing the whole ride because every seat was packed with people who looked just as tired and desperate as I felt. The address on the card led me to the outskirts of the city, a battered industrial strip full of forgotten warehouses and gravel parking lots. Harrison and Sons didn't look like much from the outside. Just a squat red brick building with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign that buzzed weakly in the morning air. But inside, the smell hit me first. Sawdust. Oil. Honest work. The place was alive with noise, the buzz of table saws, the rhythmic thunk-thunk of hammers, the scrape of sandpaper against wood. Men in denim overalls moved with purpose, crafting things with their hands, real things, things that would last longer than any of us. I stood just inside the doorway, feeling completely out of place in my second-hand dress shoes and threadbare jacket. After a few awkward minutes, a tall man with silver hair and arms like tree trunks spotted me and walked over. "You Mitch's kid?" he asked, his voice rough but not unkind. I nodded. "He gave me this." I held up the card like it was a badge. The man grunted. "Name's Walter Harrison. You want work, you'll get it. Not pretty work, not easy work. But it's honest. You game?" There was no interview. No references. No background checks. Just one question, "Are you game?" And I was. God help me, I was. Walter tossed me a pair of gloves that looked like they'd survived a war and pointed toward a stack of rough planks by the back wall. "First job, sort those. Good wood to the left, scrap to the right. Breaks at noon. If you're still standing by then, we'll talk about keeping you longer." That morning nearly broke me. The planks were heavy, splintered, and the cold air made my fingers feel like they were full of broken glass. My shoulders screamed. My back threatened mutiny. But I didn't stop. For once in my life, I wasn't going to be the disappointment they said I was. By noon, my arms felt like wet noodles, but the stack was sorted, the scraps hauled off, and the good wood stacked neatly against the wall. Walter came back, looked over the piles, and nodded once. "You work like you mean it," he said. Then he handed me an envelope. Thin. Simple. Inside was $200 cash. "You come back tomorrow, same time. We'll see if you're serious about making this a real thing." I stood there for a second, staring at the envelope. It wasn't much. But after everything, after feeling worthless and unwanted and disposable, it was more than money. It was proof. I wasn't a failure. I wasn't who they said I was. I was something else, something stronger. That night, I walked back into Nathan's apartment a different man. I bought groceries, real groceries, not just ramen and canned soup. I gave Nathan some cash for letting me stay. I even started looking at listings for a room to rent, something small but mine. And for the first time in years, when I looked at myself in the mirror, I didn't see someone who had to beg for scraps of love from people who only loved him when he was useful. I saw someone who had fought back, quietly, fiercely, without begging for applause. 2 weeks. That's all it took. 2 weeks of sweat, bruises, and sawdust under my fingernails. 2 weeks to start building a life of my own. And then, just as my life was beginning to turn, the calls started coming. It started with a voicemail. I almost didn't listen to it. My phone buzzed while I was sanding down a stubborn old oak cabinet in the workshop, and by the time I checked it, the message had already been sitting there for an hour. The screen showed the caller, Dad. For a moment my gut twisted. Old habits die hard. There was still a part of me, the part they raised, that thought, maybe he's finally proud of me. Maybe he's calling to apologize. I pressed play. His voice was sharp, impatient, like he was hurrying through the words. "Call us back. It's important." "No, hello. No, how are you?" Just an order barked out like I was still the boy they could command. I deleted the message without replying. A few hours later, another call. Mom this time. I didn't answer, but I watched the voicemail transcribe itself on the screen. Jason, sweetheart, we need to talk. Things are complicated. We need you at home. It's not the same without you. Not the same without you. The same woman who laughed when I packed my bags like I was a joke now saying she needed me? I pocketed the phone and went back to work, letting the steady hum of tools drown out the noise in my head. But they didn't stop. The texts started piling up, like a tide trying to pull me back under. Dad, your brother is messing up the bills. We're in trouble. Mom, please, Jason. Just come home for a few days. We miss you. Dad, you think you're better than us now? Grow up. Mom, I know we said things we didn't mean. Family forgives. The guilt they tried to pour into every word, it used to work. It used to break me. But not anymore. I wasn't the boy who needed their approval like oxygen. I was the man who had a paycheck, a place lined up, a future. A future they had no part in building. A week after the calls started, Nathan caught me tossing my phone onto the couch with a scoff. You okay, man? He asked, setting down a box of pizza he'd grabbed for dinner. I shrugged. Parents are desperate now. Guess their failure was more useful than they thought. Nathan gave a low whistle. Man, you should make them sweat. Let them see how it feels to need someone who's done with them. I didn't answer right away. Part of me, deep down, still wanted to walk into that house, stand tall, and see their faces when they realized they didn't hold the chains anymore. But a bigger part of me knew, I didn't owe them that. Not a confrontation. Not a performance. Not a single second more of my life. They wanted me back because they were sinking. Not because they loved me. Not because they missed me. Because they needed what I could give. And I was done being their safety net. So I made a decision, clear, cold, final. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table in Nathan's apartment, pulled out my phone, and typed one text to my parents. It wasn't angry. It wasn't emotional. It was surgical. You said I was a failure. That you didn't want me. I listened. Don't call again. Good luck surviving. And then I blocked them. I put the phone down, leaned back in the chair, and just breathed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for their permission to live. I had given them exactly what they asked for. And it felt incredible. It didn't take long for the news to reach me. Small towns have a way of spreading rumors faster than wildfire. A guy from the workshop, Dale, came in one morning chuckling to himself. You hear about the Hendersons? He said, wiping sawdust off his hands. I froze. That was my family's last name. What about them? I asked, keeping my voice casual. Dale shrugged. Word is they're drowning. House is half in foreclosure. Your brother flunked out of community college. Your old man got let go from the factory. He shook his head. Tough break, huh? I just nodded, biting back a smirk. Tough break, indeed. They had built their lives on appearances. The proud family, the good name, and without me there to patch the holes and keep the lights on, it all unraveled faster than they ever thought possible. I wasn't gloating. Well, maybe a little. But mostly, I just felt this quiet, solid satisfaction. I didn't have to lift a finger. I didn't have to say a word. Life was giving them the lesson I never could. And me? I was just getting started. It was a Saturday afternoon when they showed up. I had just gotten back from the workshop, arms sore, boots caked in dirt and sawdust. I was climbing the stairs to my new apartment, a tiny studio, but mine, when I heard the familiar voices. Turning the corner, I saw them standing there in the hallway. Dad, arms crossed. Mom, wringing her hands like she was the victim. For a second, we all just stared at each other. Then Dad spoke first. Jason, we need to talk. I shook my head. No. You made it pretty clear before. Mom stepped forward, her voice trembling. Please, Jason. Things aren't good at home. We didn't mean what we said. I studied them. The worn clothes. The tired faces. The desperation they couldn't quite hide anymore. It should have made me feel something. Pity, maybe. Anger. Regret. But all I felt was distance. Like I was looking at strangers. You told me you didn't want me, I said calmly. You told me to survive. So I did. Dad's face flushed. We were angry. You can't hold that against us forever. I just smiled, not cruelly, but with a kind of finality. You were right, I said. I'm better off without you. Then I turned, unlocked my door, and left them standing in the hallway. I didn't open the door when they knocked. Not once. Not even when Mom's voice cracked, begging me to hear her out. I sat on the other side, calm, sipping a cheap cup of coffee, listening as the knocking grew softer, then stopped. After a few minutes, I heard their footsteps retreat down the hallway. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel cruel. I just felt free. Later that night, I blocked their new numbers too. No more late-night guilt trips. No more family emergencies. No more pretending they cared when they only ever needed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living for their approval, or anyone else's. I was building something real. Piece by piece. Without them. And that was enough. The weeks that followed felt unreal. It was like stepping out of a storm into sunlight, blinking, unsure if it was real, waiting for the rain to start again. But it didn't. Walter at Harrison and Sons offered me full-time. Steady hours. Real pay. Health insurance. He even gave me a set of my own tools, battered and second-hand, but mine. I found a better apartment too. Still small, still humble. But when I turned the key in the lock, it felt like victory. A little one-bedroom with scuffed hardwood floors, a view of the cracked alley below, and enough space for a battered second-hand couch and a mattress on the floor. It didn't matter. It was mine. I bought a used pickup truck next, an old Ford with a dented fender and a stubborn transmission. But it ran. And every time I slid into that driver's seat, I remembered all the nights my father muttered under his breath about what a loser I was, how I'd never make it out there. Funny how quiet those voices sounded now. Meanwhile, back in the town I left behind, the cracks were spreading. I didn't need to hear it from them, word travels. Friends of friends whispered about it at the diner. Neighbors talked about it at the workshop. The mortgage went unpaid. My brother, the one they always compared me to, got caught stealing from the gas station where he worked. Dad's old buddies stopped coming around. Mom, once the queen of neighborhood gossip, suddenly didn't have anyone to sip coffee with. Their castle was crumbling. And they had no one left to blame but themselves. Every now and then, I'd get a glimpse of it, a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize, a Facebook message from some distant cousin saying, "You should call your parents, they're not doing well." I didn't answer. I didn't even open them anymore. I didn't need revenge. Watching them reap what they sowed, that was enough. And me? I kept building. Saved every spare dollar. Took extra shifts when I could. Started dreaming bigger, little by little. A woodworking certification course. Plans for my own tiny business someday. A life that wasn't about surviving, but thriving. I was everything they said I couldn't be. And I did it without them. It was almost a year to the day when I saw them again. Not by choice. Walter had invited me to a local craft fair to show off some of the custom work I'd been helping build, beautiful tables, hand-carved benches, things made to last generations. It was a big deal. My first real step into the world as someone. I was setting up the booth, hammering in a sign that read, "Harrison and Sons Custom Woodworks," when I caught sight of them across the street. Dad, stooped and older than I remembered. Mom, thinner, the sharpness in her face dulled into something almost desperate. They didn't notice me at first. They were too busy arguing about something, Mom's hands fluttering wildly, Dad scowling at a battered envelope he was waving around. Even from a distance, they looked small. Not the towering figures of my childhood. Not the people whose approval I'd once lived and died by. Just two tired, bitter people in a crowd that had moved on without them. Walter came up beside me, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. "You ready for today, kid?" he asked. I looked at him, at the man who gave me a shot when no one else would, and smiled. Yeah, I said. I'm ready. For a second, I thought about walking over there. I thought about throwing their words back in their faces, about making them see me, really see me. But then I realized. I didn't need to. I didn't owe them a confrontation. I didn't owe them a single second more of my life. I had already won. So I turned away. I focused on my work. I shook hands with customers, answered questions, and stood tall behind the display of tables and chairs my hands had helped build. That night, when the fair ended, I locked the cash box with a grin. I'd made more money in one day than I used to make in 2 weeks back home. And as I drove my old pickup back to my apartment, windows down, night air cool against my skin, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Peace.